Welcome to another episode of the Pitch BTCC show. We'll be talking about what happened last weekend at Thruxton, a really exciting super fast circuit, and then looking forward to Croft as well, with stats thrown in from Matt Salisbury. But I'm joined here by my guest, Bobby Thompson, British touring car driver, the most handsome man in the paddock, so they say. But we're having a chat today, but you haven't been on the grid this year in British touring cars after a really spectacular accident last year at Croft, but we'll talk about that later. But we were chatting before the programme. I didn't realise that you raced with all these big names in karting when you started out.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky, really lucky. Even to do karting, I was lucky at a young age. You know, it's an expensive sport to get into at a young age. And yeah, I was able to race with some of the great names in Formula One and GT world today.
Yeah, so you're talking Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, George Russell. Blimey, really, maybe you should have been in Formula One. But I think they might have stayed a little bit smaller than you've ended up.
Yeah, I know. I've sort of just got taller and maybe a little bit wider than half of them as well. Yeah, they're mega drivers. You could see it back in the day in karting. You know, they were on their game back then, so they must be incredible now. But it's always good to say, "Oh, I beat him back in karting," eh?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, again, most of us in motorsport now, even me at my grand old age, started in karts, and that's the thing. I mean, what does that give you as an advantage to sort of jump from? I mean, there are differences between karts and cars, but I mean, what's the big advantage that you learn? What's the big thing you learn when you're going karting at all these circuits around the world?
Meeting people's huge outside of the kart, outside of the motorsport, but inside the kart is racecraft. You know, you can see a kid that's come through and done a load of karting to a kid that's maybe started a little bit late, learning that racecraft and learning how to work your race weekend is huge. You know, qualifying well to make sure you do well in the races. Little things like that you learn at 8 to about 16 years old is huge when you take it up to stuff like the British touring cars. Right,
okay. I suppose also accidents in a kart a little bit cheaper than if you're in a car.
Yeah, tell me about it, mate.
But having said that, it's still really expensive to get into karting now. I mean, you spend a lot of the drivers are coming in to do Ginetta Juniors, and it's a lot cheaper to do that than it is to go around Europe doing karting.
Yeah, which I think's silly. I think you know you can run too far with something, can't you? I mean, it's great, do karting, learn all the tricks of the trade, but I don't think you need to be wasting, I'd say, that much money before you're going into something a lot bigger, better on the ITV package.
No, exactly. No, I agree. So after karting, you sort of had a go at single seaters as well. So you had a go at that in Formula 4, and how did that come about?
It's actually a bit of a strange one. We was going to do another round of Fiesta Juniors. That's my first step out of karting we made. My dad got me a Fiesta, a bit of dad and lad. My dad was running it. I was trying my best to drive it, and real learning the front wheel drive stuff. And then we got a call from a team saying that Ash Sutton had pulled out and had moved to another team. Did I want to jump in for a good price? So yeah, thanks to Ash Sutton for kick-starting my career on the ITV TOCA weekend. So yeah, he got me in. We only done 3 rounds, if I remember rightly. But it was great just to see the big difference from Fiesta Club racing up to the big weekend with some really quick kids. But I was still at that age. I didn't understand a car so much. I was 15, 16, and I was still struggling to take my karting brain out and put my car brain in to understand weight transfer, how the brakes work, because obviously you've only got brakes on the back on a go-kart. So all this sort of stuff to learn, and yeah, I'd say being on that weekend, you learn fast. I mean, as you know, on a touring car weekend, you've got to perform.
Yeah, no, definitely. So then after that, it sounds like you suddenly thought, right, saloon cars is the way for me to go if I'm going to make a career from motorsport. So then you went to the VW Cup for 3 years, which is where I met you, because we had a massive accident together, the biggest accident I've ever had, barrel rolling through the gravel at paddock. And neither of our faults, I'll add, so it's not Bobby's fault, it's fine. We're still mates, it's fine. So we run that, but after 3 years, you did it with Team Hard and then Power Max Racing, and then back to Team Hard again, and then won the championship, which is what, you know, it's not easy winning championships. And I always say that to young guys. Don't lose that opportunity. If you've got a chance to win a championship, go all in, make every effort to try and win it. But, you know, that was great. So that was your sort of stepping stone into touring cars.
Yeah, I think that's the reason we looked at it. I mean, at the time it was Clio Cup, which is now the Mini Challenge on the Tucker weekend. And it was either between VW Cup or Clio Cup. And for the money, I think you're getting a better car at the time in VW Cup. We was on the British GT weekend, so still a prestigious race weekend that gets some fans along and gets some hospitality in and to entertain, you know, guests. For me, when I was doing Formula Ford EcoBoost, I was getting taller, money wasn't getting any bigger, and you know, the bills are going up if you wanted to go to the next step, which would be F3. So, you know, it was a no-brainer for me to go to front-wheel drive, tin-top sort of, you know, race cars. So yeah, back over to the VW Cup was absolute key. Tony Gillam at Team Hard, you know, got me back in a race car because I thought it was going to be, you know, game over, maybe get back in the Fiesta. So, you know, he really helped me out, got me into a VW Cup car. We had a good first year, again, learning front-wheel drive, learning a slick tyre, a different car. And then, yeah, I jumped across to Power Max, which was great. We was trialling a new car, VW Polo, a car that had never been in the championship before. And it was tricky. It was tricky because it was almost go as fast as we can, not crash into you, and try and get this new car up the front as quick as the Golfs. So yeah, it was a hard year, but I had so much fun. Again, that was the first year I drove my first touring car, first test at the Dunlop tyre test at Snet when I was about 18 or something like that. So right. Yeah, it was my first ever chance to really prove to some touring car teams, you know, hello, here I am. Mm-hmm. I'll try and prove I know what I'm doing, help me out and get me on that grid.
No, so and then you moved back to Team Hard, won the championship, which then gave you a stepping stone to touring cars, again with Tony Gillam. Yeah. Fantastic opportunity because, you know, and fair play to Tony. You know, they work hard as a team and they've given so many people their opportunities to get into British touring cars.
Yeah, I think if you look at the touring car grid today, it's nearly half the people on the grid have come through Tony or Tony's had something to do with them getting them there. I mean, at the end of my second year of VW Cup with Power Max, I thought it was game over. I thought we lost a sponsor. It wasn't a particularly big sponsor, and I thought, you know, it's game over. Find myself a proper job maybe, and you know, and maybe come back in a few years. At the end of the year, I met Neil at GKR Scaffolding on a motorsport corporate event, and yeah, it just clicked. He wanted to get involved in something a bit different. I wanted to go racing, so it just worked, and we had a year as in VW Cup with Team Hard, where, like you say, we won the championship with a real cool livery on the car as well. GKR Neil really enjoyed himself. Obviously, I had so much fun winning the championship, and that gave me the step up into the VW Passat.
Yeah, no, so I mean, so you had 2 years in the Passat, learnt your craft in British touring cars, and what was the big difference jumping into, you know, into the Premier Series in the UK?
You've got to be on your game, out the car, in the car. You know, you can't be slacking at any point. You know, that was the hardest thing. My first couple of rounds, fitness as well. It's a 3 races in a day, and even when you're out the car, you're not stopping. So that is something I really learned in the first half of the first year. There's not one guy on that grid that can't put in a bad lap either. And like I say, you have to be on your game as soon as, you know, you get going at the start of the weekend, because you don't have much testing. And even, you know, before the start of the race weekends, before the season, there's not much testing either. So yeah, it's just, you know, really working on being absolutely pinpoint perfect when I could be.
No, that's right. And then moving on to, so you had 2 years with Tony with the Passat, which you learnt a lot and got some good results, and then moved into with Trade Price Cars and working with me when AMD were running the team as well, which was ups and downs during the season, and then actually things were looking like, whoa, this is looking good, looking good. Jack Sears Trophy, Michael Crease, you were battling with Michael Crease, both on the track as well a few times. It got a bit feisty, but actually you were looking really strong. But then we came to Croft, and then that shows you the ups and downs of motorsport. You had a great first race, was it?
Yeah, we qualified pole that got taken away from us.
That's right, right. Yeah, you got better memory than me. So that's it,
somehow.
Yeah.
But we had a pole that got taken away that Some say it should, some
Yeah.
say it shouldn't
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
But it was a close one in the wet, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
we had a good weekend. We had Chaz engineering us for the first weekend, which was fantastic. We gelled real well together. And I think a big thing, which wasn't great for the team, but me being maybe a little bit selfish, was I was only the car in the team that weekend.
Yeah,
I didn't have a teammate.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of focus was around me.
Yeah, yeah.
And we made to, maybe from being 10th, 11th, 12th, we was in that top 6, top 7. So it was a fantastic start to the weekend.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it would have been a fantastic, finish if I had not had the accident.
No, that's right. So let's have a look at that accident and see exactly what happened.
In 2 weeks' time. Now let's see if we can piece it all together. There he is off in the background, and then the car just digs in. Over it goes.
Yeah, for some reason he was out on the right-hand side. Wow, that must have gone over completely 5 or 6 times. He was on the right-hand side of he was off the track, wasn't he, before the turn-in to the Jim Clark S's.
Yes.
Whether he'd been forced off the road or what, I don't know. But yeah, the car hit the sort of dirt sideways on, just dug in and started flipping it over. Oh.
It's another example of how well built these cars are.
So that was a spectacular British touring car shunt. I'm sure they'll be replaying that over the years. So
Yeah.
you'll have British touring car stardom forever.
Yeah.
But I mean, I really took it out of you. But you seem fighting fit now.
Yeah, back ready to go. Don't get me wrong, it was tough, really, really tough. The guys at Rescue Racer, Naomi Deakin, really helped me out, keeping me fit, keeping an eye on me, and keeping an eye on my head, which took a bit of a pounding, but yeah, I'm back ready to go.
But they hadn't seen you before, so they didn't really know any different. But on that note, join us after the break when we'll be having a chat with Matt Salisbury about some of the stats from last weekend at Thruxton, and also all the highlights of the thrills and spills from the fastest UK circuit. Welcome back to the Pitch BTCC show. I'm joined here by Bobby Thompson, ex-British touring car racer, but hopes to get back on the grid at any time soon when an opportunity shows itself, really, I suppose. But let's have a look back at the highlights from Thruxton from last weekend.
Race 1 of the day at Thruxton is go, and a good start is made by Robo this time. A good getaway by Jake Hill as well, and Josh Cook tries to go for a gap that soon disappears, but he gets past Hill. Up the inside goes Tom Oliphant in the BMW, a really good start as well. It's going to be Rowbottom versus Cook on the run up towards Campbell, Cobb and Seagrave for the first time. The Hondas were side by side. Cook is ahead, but Cook leads and they come up towards the chicane. Jake Hill to the outside line, and he's done it. Great move in the Ford.
Oh my word, that is your worst known moment, and he got the best thing was he stood on the brakes, and you just hope and pray everybody gets round you.
So there, look, Tom Ingram is, in a sense, the cork in the bottle with the heavy Hyundai Proctor to the inside line, and is Jason Plato going to try and dive through as well? He can't do it. So how did it all start? That's how it all started. Butcher absolutely launched himself up the inside.
He's having a look. That is a big, big move. He's out the throttle. Big, big sideways. He's onto it. Definitely something's done that job. Brilliant stuff.
Butcher slices up the inside of Rowbottom. There's a run between them. He tried that move a few laps back, and this time he's made it work.
Side by side here. Will he get it done? This is great stuff by Plato. Gets it done last minute. Excellent work.
The King of Thruxton strikes it. We're going to have to name a corner after him, aren't we? Out of the Cook chicane. Shall we have it? Comes Josh Cook. Another win. He's done it again at Thruxton. Josh Cook wins race 1 of the day.
So a pretty typical British touring car race from Thruxton there, with lots of overtaking, lots of high-speed action. But one driver who's really impressed me in qualifying especially is Dan Rowbottom in the Team Dynamics Honda.
Yeah, I mean, that car's been the answer to his prayers a little bit, hasn't it? He had a year out, he's come back, got in a race-winning car and a proven team, and I think he's used Shedden, Matt Neal, everyone around him to really piece that together.
Yeah, talking of Gordon Shedden, I mean, he's had a disastrous sort of return to the British touring car races. Shown massive pace, but really just hasn't had the luck to make the best of that pace.
Yeah, definitely. We all know he can do it. He's got outright pace, especially around Knockhill. He's a real fast driver. But has the touring cars got harder since he left?
Yeah, no, I mean that is a question. I mean, I think there is a little bit of luck involved, but you know, and sometimes you make your own luck, don't you? Really. But going back to the race, really, Josh Cook. I mean, what can you say? He is, as they said, the king of Thruxton. I think I've seen some images on the internet of him sitting on a throne with a ginger crown, not a gold crown, Josh, ginger crown, with a gold crown on his head. But I mean, fantastic performance. He was especially strong earlier in the season as well.
Yeah, he looked like he kept the lead quite nice there, didn't he? And he's in the same Honda as Team Dynamics, same car, maybe different setup. But
well, different, but they're running the Swindon engine, not the Honda engine. So there will be a difference there in torque delivery. Horsepower levels will be pretty similar, but the way it's delivered maybe is different.
Yeah, and he's been that in for a couple of years now, hasn't he? So yeah, he's getting again the swing of it. Again, a fantastic driver. It's a shame he's not at the front more often.
No, that's right. And Jake Hill was really strong there, quick in qualifying, dropped a little bit on the first lap or two, but some really decisive and incisive overtaking manoeuvres to come back through to second place.
Yeah, that's typical Jake, isn't it? Crazy moves, sticks the car there, doesn't he? Every time. You can always rely on Jake for a good bit of TV.
No, exactly. So, I mean, going through to race 2, they obviously start in the same position they finished in race 1, but obviously with success Ballaston. So that's going to make a big difference to how the race pans out. Let's have a look at race 2.
It is Josh Cook on pole position. And as the lights go out, it is go. And this is Tom Oliphant's chance to make a really demon start. And he does so. He gets ahead of Hill, but he can't get ahead of Cookie as they get towards the first corner of Allard. It is going to be Josh Cook who leads then with Tom Oliphant second. They've got 3 wide here. Sutton goes between the pair of them. Fantastic. Jake Hill on one side, Rory Butcher on the other, and Ash Sutton is on a mission. Block capitals underlined, because this is a storming first lap.
He really has to get the hammer down as Turkington battling with Morgan gets the job done. Sutton, overlap, game on, he's past him.
Up the inside goes Ash Sutton, this is for second place. Job done, gets the line for Allard, through he goes. Ash knows that this is one of the races where he has got the strength on his side with that lighter car, and now the move tries to come. Josh defends as best he can, but the gap's on the inside, through goes Ash Sutton, that gives him the race lead.
Yeah, it was always going to be an overlap, wasn't it?
Yeah. Centre Proctor, he's doing a great job of defending from Turkington, except he then slips a little bit wide, and this is Colin's chance.
Oh, hold your breath. He has to rely on Proctor coming out of the throttle and letting him through on the marbles. Gets it slowed down, job done. Turkington will be on the, he'll pounce on this one. He thinks better of it. And again, he's going to be careful of Turkington. Can he get the switch back? We've seen Rickard Rydell do this. I think it's job done. He's done it, good lad.
Up towards the checkered flag. It's good for the championship. He's going to be able to increase the lead for Ash Sutton. Checkered flag at the ready. Ash Sutton wins race 2 at Thruxton.
So Ash Sutton, a man on a mission in that race, really, and it was fantastic to watch, Bobby. I mean, once they took the weight that he was running in race 1 out of that car for race 2, looked like there was no stopping him.
Yeah, typical Sutton race, you know, picking them off corner by corner, lap by lap, and he just, again, looks like in a field of his own. Obviously, a lighter car to Cook. Cook being in the heavier car, struggling to get it stopped there. The fronts will be eating themselves away around Thruxton. And, yeah, real drive won again.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that the car's doing a fantastic job, and it does seem to handle in a specific way, so the team are doing a fantastic job. But Ash is quite a way forward on his teammates of Aidan Moffat and Carl Baldley. So, I mean, the driver is making a big difference to that car.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's found his sort of setup, and he always seems to like a soft car. I mean, when I've been following him, the thing looks real soft. Maybe the other two don't quite like it like that. So, yeah, he's got his thing with a rear-wheel drive car and how he likes it.
No, and also, I mean, an advantage with rear-wheel drives, but Thruxton is never seen as a rear-wheel drive circuit. It's always a front-wheel drive circuit. Maybe now with the wider tyre they're running, and there's a few differences to the track surface out the back now that they've made it at the circuit to help the tyre life. Yeah. Tyres aren't such a big problem, so maybe that's why it's helping the rear-wheel drives be a bit more on an even playing field.
Yeah, I think we've seen this a lot of this. Is it a front-wheel drive track, rear-wheel drive track, and Sutton always proves everyone wrong. It's always a rear-wheel drive track when Sutton's around.
No, exactly. Well, you know, it'll be interesting to see. So let's have a look at race 3, where the reverse grid pulled Adam Morgan out of the hat. Let's see how he got on.
Adam Adam Morgan on pole. 5-second board display. Lights will go red. Who will make the best start when the lights go out? We'll find out now because it's blast off. A good getaway by Morgan. Not a great start by Proctor, and that means that Colin Turkington is going to jump ahead of the Honda as well. And look at this, they're 3 wide for 4th within the middle of all that. Oliphant, who gets a bit of a squeeze from Hill. Butcher cops a blow or 2 on the outside line. Drama in the background. There's a Honda off at high speed.
He's going to go to the outside. Oh, this is going to be a big move. He could get this done, or he might get bounced out and have to take a shortcut. What does he do? Keeps his nose in. Knows Ash doesn't want to fight. And Plato might get the undercut. Yes, he does. He's through. Smelt off. Where is that?
Hanging out around the outside line. This is going to be brave, brave, brave stuff, and he has done it. Fantastic. Oh, Boardman gets sideways, and Sam Smelt gets caught up in that somehow, somewhere.
And Jackson off.
Comes up late on the brakes into the chicane. Josh Cook on the inside line, and that's Adam Morgan that skips the chicane. He keeps the race lead off the road also. I think that goes Oliphant. It's going to be a BMW 1-2. It'll be a 2nd win of the season for Adam Morgan, assuming he gets the chicane absolutely spot on this time. Into the braking zone they come. Checkered flag at the ready. Round 18 of the Quick Fit British Touring Car Championship has delivered drama right from the go, and it will deliver a win. Adam Morgan comes across the line for a 2nd victory of the season.
So race 3 turned into a bit of a safety car fest, really. But one of the things I was looking at the front is the front wheel drives and the rear wheel drives off the start. Rear wheel drives had a big advantage there, and it's meant to be equalised. Now, for me, looking at that, 4 front wheel drives, 4 rear wheel drives at the front of the grid, the rear wheel drives had an advantage.
Yeah, and I think they still do in the dry. Now, if we maybe saw a bit of rain, that's when you see the front wheel drives come in, get in front of the rear wheel drive guys. And touring car, the weekends, it's almost like Mr. Gal knows how to play with the weather. So I think if you want for an outright pace, I think rear wheel drive's still got it. But for a BTCC weekend, I think front wheel drive's an all-round package still.
Yeah, I think so as well, because also there's a bit of contact. It's much easier to hang on to a front-wheel drive car than it is a rear-wheel drive car.
Yeah, I'd agree. And yeah, I've seen it so many times. A rear-wheel drive gets knocked around, it's ruined their race and potentially their weekend.
Yeah. So a great result for Adam Morgan, but a little bit controversial, I've got to say, because he went off the track, did gain an advantage, and took a while to give that advantage back. In my personal view, the stewards disagreed, said that he gave the advantage back, so then he didn't deserve a penalty. But I've got to slightly disagree with that. Not that it really matters whether I disagree or not, because I'm not a steward. But what do you think about that situation?
I'm coming from a driver's point of view here. When he locked up and went wide, if you look on the footage, the car is singing. He's flat chat, so he gets the advantage. He definitely knows he gets the advantage. We all would, sitting in his same position, and the engineer will be telling him, "Come on, let's give some of this back, because obviously it's not like he gained a position from it. He may be waiting a bit longer off the throttle mid corner, braking a little earlier." But it did look like it was over a lap and a half, wasn't it? I think we was all expecting it to be a corner, and Turkington's with him, but it happened over a lap or so. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. Having said that, they did make the right decision of doing what they did because they won the race. So I mean, at the end of the day, they're right and we're wrong. But I mean, looking at that, I mean, we're going to be looking at Croft after this, which obviously you have a good and bad experience of from last year. But join us after the break when we'll be looking at the highlights of maybe last year at Croft, but also chatting with Matt Salisbury, who will be giving us a little bit more on his statistician's view of what happened at Thruxton and also leading into Croft. So welcome back to the Pitch BTCC show. I'm joined here by our guest Bobby Thompson, ex-British touring car driver, trying to get back on that grid. We've been talking about Thruxton, and then that's the on-track action, which was pretty exciting. Let's have a chat with Matt Salisbury from inside BTCC. Matt knows all the stats from all the races in the British Touring Car Championship. So what have you got from Thruxton for us, Matt?
Well, you've already had a chance to see the highlights of Thruxton. And a big highlight came in the first race of the weekend for Josh Cook with that victory. Now, we knew going into the weekend that Josh was going to be one of the men to beat because he's got a fantastic record at Thruxton in the past. Most of his wins have actually come there at what is his home circuit. And that win in race 1 was his 7th victory at Thruxton. That was a record equal in success for Josh, because it was win number 7, moves in level with Fabrizio Giovanardi, Ivan Muller and Gordon Shedden on the all-time list. And it was also a record equaling win for Honda cars. Honda have now won 27 times at Thruxton, which moves in level with Ford. Interestingly enough, the Honda wins have all come since 1996, whereas the Ford wins go all the way back to the 1960s. So it just shows that in recent years, Honda really have had the car to beat around that high-speed circuit.
Well, but it being his local circuit, I can't see how that affects it too much, because I remember other drivers who did really well there. Tom Onslow Cole, who we ran in the Golf there, was awesome through there. But I mean, I think a lot of it is to do with having local circuit knowledge if they're doing instructing there and that sort of thing. But another driver who used to go really well there was Rob Collard, and he was local. So maybe there's something in it about being a local knowledge.
Yeah, I'd say so. Like you say, going back to the coaching, instructing thing, my local circuit's Brands Hatch. I've done so many laps of that place. I know it, like the back of my hand. So it takes, comes into all effect.
Yeah, no, and then also you're looking at a circuit like Thruxton, which is super fast, which could mean that it's all about engine power, but it's not about engine power. It's about handling. It's about getting the chassis right, and really, I think that's something that Honda do really, really well.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. I mean, obviously you need a good engine at Thruxton, because you've got, a lot of top end speed as you go around the back of the circuit, but there's no point having a quick car if it's absolutely rubbish through the corners, because when you're out the back of Thruxton, you need a car that's going to be on rails when you're going through Noble, through Goodwood, through Church. You don't want to go in there with a really quick car and not be able to take the corners. And the Honda's a really good handling car. But also, if you look at Ash Sutton's Infinity, for example, that car in terms of the handling was spot on over the course of the weekend. You look at the move he made in the second race, going into Church, going between 2 cars at Thruxton, into that corner is not something you're going to do unless you've got a good handling car beneath you. So I think it's a combination of, you need handling and you need the power to really maximise the lap around there.
Well, what you also need is you need a compliant competitor alongside you, because going into Church side by side with one on the left and one on the right, they both need to work together. And one thing that really impressed me at the weekend, Bobby, was that all the drivers seem to have a lot of respect for each other. They seem to be giving each other a lot of space. There seemed to be a lot of spatial awareness. I was really, really impressed.
Yeah, you've only got to look back a couple of years ago. Simon Belcher ended up in the trees there. So that's the reason why the drivers give a lot of respect there. A little bit of room. You get into 150 odd at the end of that straight. And just going back to what we were talking about there, it's key at Thruxton to have a car that can get stopped, actually. So it's all well and good having good straight line speed. I had it back in the BTCC. But when you get to the end of that straight, if you can't get it stopped, you haven't got a good stopping power, she's not going to want to turn when you get to those chicanes.
Well, braking and traction are key there, really. So it's an all-round sort of chassis circuit that the engine has to back that up. But I mean, it's interesting to see that Honda have been so successful. But I mean, it's a really hard circuit to get your head around, because some people were saying there weren't a huge amount of overtakes at the weekend. Personally, I thought it was brilliant racing, because people were giving each other space. They were actually sort of setting moves up that didn't always come off, whereas sometimes they just sort of go gung-ho, all locked up, bash, 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 and through they go. We didn't see a lot of that last weekend.
Well, I think one thing that the TV cameras maybe can't and struggle to pick up is how fast the cars are actually going around there. You see a lot of more interesting, potentially more closer racing, maybe at a track maybe like Brands Hatch or Snetterton, where the speeds are a little bit slower and you're actually stopping the car a lot more. Here, we're going really, really fast, and it's hard. Once you get behind a car, you'll notice, especially the front rear drive guys, they'll have a bit of understeer. So it's hard to actually sometimes get close enough to make that move into one of those chicanes.
Well, what's great about Thruxton as well, Matt, is it's a real old school circuit. So a lot of it hasn't really changed in the last 30, 40 years, really.
No, I mean, it is pretty much as it's always been. I mean, there has been little revisions, one of which is off track really at Church. Bobby mentioned there the incident with Simon Belcher going into the trees a few years ago, and they've spent a lot of time and a lot of money on that corner to make it safer if you do have an incident. And we actually saw the benefit of that work at the weekend, because in the mini challenge race, we did have a car went off at Church, and rather than ending up rolling into some trees somewhere, he hit the barrier. Obviously, you don't want to hit a barrier at high speed at Church, but it certainly could have been a lot worse than it was. But the guys at Thruxton have spent a lot of money when you consider the amount of racing that they can actually do each year, because all circuits have limits on how much they can use the track, and Thruxton is one that has less racing days than a lot of others.
Yeah, I mean, when I said it hasn't changed for 30, 40 years, it's changed in lots of ways, and they've really made a big difference to how it is as a spectator experience, but also for the cars when they have it. But the actual layout is pretty much the same as it was from day one.
Yeah, still a ring road of an airfield, which is a working airfield as well. You know, on test days, you've seen it plenty of time. You're coming out of Goodwood, and it looks like there's a plane going to land on your roof. But
I've ducked my head down a few times when a Cessna comes down really low over the top of your awning.
Yeah, typical UK circuit. It's a ring road of an airfield, and yeah, I mean they work great, but they're just really fast.
So, what other stats have you got from us from Thruxton, Matt?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like we've said that the Honda's such a strong car there, but of course it was the only front-wheel drive car that won a race, and it only won one at the weekend because the other wins went to rear-wheel drive, with Ash Sutton winning race 2 and then Adam Morgan winning race 3. Ash's victory is interesting because it takes him to 4 wins this season, but if you look at the laps led, he's only actually been out front for 21 laps this season, which equates to about 6.6% of the laps that we've completed. So it just shows that it's not necessarily how many laps you lead, it's when you lead them, which is something that Dick Bennett's alluded to in the last show when we pointed out the landmark that WSR had reached, and he said, I'm not really bothered about laps led, I'm just bothered about the races that we've won. Looking at then race 3 with Adam Morgan, as I said, more wins for him and for Sicily at Thruxton than any other circuit. But Adam ended the Thruxton weekend as one of only 3 drivers who's now completed every racing lap this season. The others, Jason Plato and Colin Turkington. So quite interesting that we're at this stage of the season and we've only got those 3 drivers who've had the consistency of being able to do every racing lap over the year.
Well, that's one of the big things, I think, of the experience, because you talk about those 3 drivers. So Adam's a little bit younger than the other 2, but he's got a wealth of experience in British touring cars. But that sort of means that they are going to be there and they'll have a lot of experience about getting the car to a finish and making sure they don't get involved in any instance. But a big thing for me at the weekend was there was a slight changing of the old guard, I thought. I thought we had a lot of the young guns who've been coming through over the last few years, but it's been a bit stop and start. And maybe, when I say older guys, they're a lot younger than me, but, you know, Jason Plato's, Colin Turkinson's, Gordon Sheddon's, those sort of guys have been, and Matt Neal when he was here last year, you know, you think they're going to be dropping down, and then suddenly they come back and get a great result. And obviously Colin's still winning races and winning championships. But I thought I sensed a big feeling that these young guys coming through, your Cooks, your Hills, your Proctors, your Ingrams, your Suttons, obviously, who's won the championship, but they're all still young guys. And there's a big change I felt in the field.
Yeah, I think that's down to some of these younger guys are getting hold of good seats, good cars, good teams. You know, also there's what you're seeing with drivers, you're seeing with engineers as well. You're seeing new, fresh engineers come up through the teams, and yeah, that's obviously showing that this year more than others that it's starting to work.
Yeah, no, that's right. Anything else from Thruxton, Matt?
Well, just touching on what you said there about experience, I think we're seeing, like Bobby said, a lot of good young drivers are now getting the right package underneath them. At the end of the weekend, a lot was made about Ash extending his lead over Tom in the championship, and people were sitting thinking, he's got a nice handy lead there. You know, Tom's going to have to be strong when we get to Croft, and Colin's going to have to be strong to get to Croft to try and close the gap. And you almost forgot that it's not actually Colin who's 3rd in the standings behind him now, because Josh has gone up into 3rd place. Jake Hill had another good weekend and got another podium at Thruxton to go up into 4th. So suddenly we're starting to get new drivers involved in the championship battle. I know Josh has been there when we've got to the business end of the season before, but never with a realistic chance of taking the title in the final round. But, you know, Jake's suddenly becoming a championship contender for the first time. And, you know, Dan Rowbottom dropped back a bit at Thruxton, but, you know, Dan's suddenly looking like someone who could fight for a championship championship. So whereas a few years ago, you just started the season saying, oh, well, I think, you know, Matt Neal, Gordon Shedden, Colin Turkington, Jason Plato, they're the people to watch. I think we're now getting to the stage where you're going into a season or you're getting halfway through a season and you honestly don't know who's going to be the person who comes out on top, because we've got that strength and we've got these young drivers who are getting more experienced, are only getting quicker, and they're suddenly right in the mix.
Well, the strength in depth in the field is fantastic. I mean, what I think is going to happen, so fine, Ash Sutton, hey, he's got a great lead in the championship, but that can all change with just one bad result in race 1 at Croft. And we're coming to the time of year when it's a little bit colder and a little bit damper.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Croft, I would say, is a rear-wheel drive circuit, but like you say, the weather potentially coming in. It's going to be a colder, damper weekend where the front-wheel drive's proven where it can just nip away at those rear-wheel drive cars.
Well, just one thing on that. A couple of years ago now, they resurfaced Croft, and that sort of took away probably half of any advantage of being a rear-wheel drive traction-based circuit, if you like. So there's not so much. I mean, this year it's thrown itself, circuits that are meant to be rear-wheel drive end up being front-wheel drive, circuits that are front-wheel drive ended up being rear-wheel drive. So who knows what's going to happen when we go to Croft. But maybe after the break we'll have a chat more about what's going on in the British Touring Car Championship, but also have a look forward to Croft coming in a couple of weeks' time. Welcome back to the Pitch BTCC show, where I'm joined by Bobby Thompson and Matt Salisbury. Let's have a look back at last year's races in the British Touring Car Championship from Croft.
Round 19 of the Quick Fit British Touring Car Championship is go. Good start made by Cook. Good getaway by Turkington. Jake Hill tries to crowd the BMWs on the way down towards Clervaux Corner. Turkington will go second. Hill on the outside of Turkington, but Josh Cook leads the way. Jake Hill on the outside line gets back into the queue, moves ahead of Turkington. Butcher to the inside of Oliphant into the complex. Sutton gets turned around. Jake Hill is on the outside line, down towards Clervaux. He brakes late, but it's the wrong line for the corner. Josh Cook goes back into the lead. Great racing. Goes to the inside line into the hairpin. This is the 10th place. Ash Sutton goes through. Looks to the inside line, lines up, goes through, side by side, job done. Josh Cook is going to win for the second time in 2020. Round 19 of the Quick Fit British Touring Car Championship, won by Josh Cook. We're racing at Croft. Good start made by both the rear-wheel drive cars. It's going to be Josh Cook that hits the front, and Turkington goes very deep into the corner and through the gravel. Sutton's ahead of him, and Turkington's in the tyre barrier. And Turkington's championship chances take a big hammer blow at turn 1.
Another big off, it's Butcher again. Fortunately, this time there's no barrier in the way.
Josh Cook, the race 1 winner, is not necessarily going to lead at the end of the lap because Jake Hill stuck his nose up the inside, but that's left the door open for Ash Sutton to mount the attack for second place. There's contact, damage to the Infinity.
Has he got a puncture? I think he's got a puncture on the right front. He's going to hemorrhage points to Turkington. And through goes Neil on Jake Hill for second place.
Look, Neil closes, gets up the inside, turns Cook sideways, and he goes through. He didn't back out of it to let Josh keep the place, so Matt Neal goes through, but that surely is going to be discussed post-race. Lights go red at Croft. Race 3 of the day is underway. Good getaway by Chilton. They run down towards Clervaux Corner. Up into second place goes Ingram, then through on the inside. Camish third, and Matt Neal and Jake Hill get together, and Stephen Jelly gets it wrong.
And Turkington across the inside, trying to avoid any kind of... Oh, he's got a problem.
He has got a problem. Turkington in strife already as Ingram goes for the race lead. Look at that, fantastic on the inside. Wow. Big off there. That is Bobby Thompson. Camish thinks about the inside line, goes for it, will go through on the inside. Oliphant trying to attack, trying to defend, he goes a little bit wide. Can the Infinity squirt up the inside round Hawthorne? They are almost level, and yes, Sutton goes through. Another place gain for him. Dan Camish in the Dynamics Run Honda Civic crawling all over the back of the Speedworks Toyota. Ingram, though, gets the car positioned absolutely dead right, but he comes across the line to take the checkered flag.
Well, looking back at those races from last year, it shows you how quickly, Bobby, the tide can turn really, because you had, first of all, there's two things there. It was always historically a rear-wheel drive circuit at Croft, and again we've heard that story a lot this year, but it seems to be equaling itself out over the whole race season between front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive, but also how quickly Colin Turkington and Ash Sutton's championships hopes really struck a sort of an iceberg really at Croft in that they didn't score many points at all.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting one. It's always a track for me where you'll see some guys that are maybe around 10th place get their chance and get out the front, especially if the weather changes. So you're seeing guys there that are just hungry for a podium, not in the championship fight, that can sometimes get in the way.
Yeah, well, you're getting towards the end of the year, and if they haven't had a result now, they're actually super keen to get up there, and if they've got their chance, they're willing to take it. So what else have you got for us, Matt, from Croft?
Well, it's just interesting what you touched on there about front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive. As you said, traditionally, it's been a rear-wheel drive circuit. The stats would back that up if you look at Colin Turkington being the most successful driver there, because he's won 12 times. That's why they call him the King of Croft. He's won twice as many races as anybody else. But the wins in the last few years, particularly since the circuit was resurfaced, have gone more towards front-wheel drive cars. You'd maybe look at that and think Josh Cook could go there with a good chance. Of course, he's going to have a bit of weight on board, but the 2 wins that we saw him take there in the highlights package, if he could do that again, suddenly he's right back into championship contention. So you have to kind of look at the balance between who's going to be carrying weight and then the drivetrains, because people like Tom Oliphant has the rear-wheel drive and he's going there with no weight, so he could go well. But Ash Sutton and the Infinity has carried weight well wherever he's gone this season. So as you said, I don't think it's going to be a case of he'll go well because he's got rear-wheel drive, he'll go well because he's got front-wheel drive, or even he'll go well because he's got ballast, because Croft's kind of got a bit of everything. You need the momentum around the back of the circuit, you need a car that's good on the brakes, you need a car that's good in terms of the engine. You really need at Croft an all-round package, perhaps more than any other circuit.
Well, that's right, I agree. So from a driver's point of view, Bobby, I mean, you've heard there what the car needs, because it needs a good braking, needs good traction, good high speed, but also good rotation in the slow stuff. But from a driver's point of view, what bits do you think you can add as a driver to what's going on with the basic car?
Well, the key for the whole weekend is a good quali. And we see that at most touring car weekends, but here more than ever. The track's so thin. So like you touched on there, a good car that can rotate well. It's horrible to have a car that understeers around there. It's never ending because it just gets worse and worse, especially for that first sector.
So when we say rotate, what do we mean when we say rotate, just for viewers who maybe not know the language?
So you want a good front end underneath you. You want a car that almost steers itself, rear steer. So you're wanting a car to do half the steering work so you don't have to. And essentially, the car being put sideways before it's actually having a big moment. So you're wanting that car to steer for you a lot more on the entry to the corner. And in front-wheel drive, that really looks after the front tyres.
Okay, that's good. And then, Matt, looking back at that, what else have you got that you think you might be able to add to that?
Well, I think there's one thing that we've not touched on when it comes to Croft, and it is something that does need to be mentioned, is when we are going to Croft. Normally, obviously we didn't last year, but normally Croft would be around the midway point of the season, so we'd be going there in the summer. We're going there later in the year again this season, and Croft is a circuit where when it rains, it rains. So there's the potential for, poor weather over the weekend, which could affect proceedings. The track temperatures are probably going to be a lot lower as well. And Croft, a bit like Thruxton, is a circuit that doesn't have as much track action going on as some of the venues on the calendar. So there might be an element of when we go there, the circuit's a little bit green, so it might take some drivers a bit more time to get up to speed. It might take a bit more time to nail the setup right. So it could mean that going into qualifying, we've got a couple of drivers who don't quite have the car where they want it to be. And that could lead to things being mixed up a bit in qualifying, which of course then leads to a mixed up grid for race day. So I think the weather forecast is something that we'll also need to be keeping an eye on before we get to Croft.
Well, there's two things with that. You were talking about the circuit, and it's maybe a circuit the drivers are maybe a bit green on and not getting used to it. So earlier in the year, there was quite a big test day that went on there that actually quite a few of the teams went to. So it maybe shows how important that is, just trying to get the drivers involved. But then also going back to the weather side of things, now that should help front-wheel drive cars. Oh, again, we talk about this, but it's quite interesting because you've obviously got a driver in Ash Sutton who's in rear-wheel drive, and Colin Turkington who's in 4th place, 3rd place, something like that now, who's in there. But you've got a lot of front-wheel drive cars who are still within shooting distance of the championship. And if the weather turns, that's going to help. But actually, will it help Ash Sutton? Help Ash Sutton beat Colin Turkington, possibly, because we've seen that the Infinity is maybe better in damp conditions, but it isn't as good really as front-wheel drive. So I think we could see a real turnaround, Bobby, when we go to Croft.
Yeah, and going back to what you say about the weather, after the resurface, there is so much grip there in the wet, so much grip. Your times in the damp and not that far off from the dry. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see, 1, who looks after their tyres, 2, who gets good quality, and 3, who can really stick it to the championship fight.
Yeah, so weather's going to be a big thing, Matt. I mean, and anything else that you can think of that's going to throw a spanner in the works to this Ash Sutton steamroller that we're seeing at the minute?
Well, I think the simple thing is you can't rely on having a good run from now until the end of the season in the British Touring Car Championship. We've got 4 rounds left to go. We've still got nearly half a season of racing to do. And to think that one driver's going to get through those 4 rounds and those 12 races without hitting a problem at some point, it just isn't realistic. Of course, Ash has had a bit of a bad run already earlier in this season, and luckily for him, his bad weekend came at the same time as Colin Turkington had a bad weekend and as Tom Ingram had a bad weekend. But I think there is still an awful lot of racing to be done. There's an awful lot of twists and turns before we get to the season finale. And people always say with the British Touring Car Championship, it's funny how when we get to the final round, we've always got 4 or 5 drivers who are still in contention for the championship. But if you look at the standings as they are at the moment, I don't think it's inconceivable that we could have even more drivers than ever before still in contention, because each race weekend at the moment, we're seeing one driver who goes into the weekend 3rd or 4th is suddenly coming out 8th or 9th, and a driver who's outside the top 10 is suddenly vaulting right up there. And look at Senna Proctor as a prime example. He didn't do the first round of the season. He didn't score any points in the second round of the season because he was carrying a load of ballast into Snetterton. And all of a sudden, he's up there in the top 10. So if Senna Proctor can get into the top 10 with effectively 6 no scores to start his season, there's still an awful lot of racing to do and an awful lot of points to be scored.
So it just shows you what Croft can do and how it can throw a spanner in the works of everybody's championship, really. But thanks very much, Bobby, for joining us. It's been great to hear from you, and looking forward to you coming back for the British Touring Car Championship at some time in the future. Matt, thanks very much for your help, and looking forward to chatting with you again when we come back from Croft, where will we see Ash Sutton continue in the same sort of dominant fashion, or will something happen that throws his championship rivals a bone? See you after Croft.